This is the story, the legend, of a young man by the name of Phineas Gage, whose freak accident and bizarre recovery made him the unwitting patron saint of modern neuroscience. While most other scientific myths depart from reality by inflating the heroes into godlike creatures, Gage, on the other hand, gets demonized. This only adds to the tenacity of the myth, maybe in part because it's so fascinating for us to watch someone break bad. The date was September 13th, 1848, and 25-year-old Phineas Gage was working on the railroad in Rutland, Vermont. In order to lay new tracks, it was necessary to level the uneven terrain by controlled blasting. Gage was in charge of the detonations, which involved drilling holes in the stone, partially filling the holes with explosive powder, covering the powder with sand, and using a fuse and a tamping iron to trigger an explosion into the rock. On the fateful day, a momentary distraction let Gage begin tamping directly over the powder before his assistant had the chance to cover it with sand. The result was a powerful explosion away from the rock and toward Gage. The fine-pointed, 3-centimeter thick, 109-centimeter long tamping iron was hurled, rocket-like, through his face, skull, brain, and then into the sky. Gage was momentarily stunned, but regained full consciousness immediately thereafter. Gage was not paralyzed, able to talk and even walk with the help of his men. The tamping iron landed upright in the dirt 30 yards away, streaked with red and greasy brain matter. The first doctor to arrive reported seeing Gage sitting upright in a chair in the hotel that had become his makeshift hospital, a volcano of upturned bone jutting out of his scalp. According to legend, Gage craned his neck to look at the doctor and joked, "Here's business enough for you." Gage soon developed an infection and nearly died because of it. His family had already had him measured for his coffin and funeral attire. Yet after desperate surgery by Dr. John Harlow, Gage had fully recovered within 10 weeks, though his left eye had to be sewn shut. After his recovery, Gage appeared to return to a normal life. Dr. John Harlow tested his physical capabilities as well as his intelligence with numerous tests, all of which Gage passed with flying colors. However, those closest to Gage soon realized that while Gage had survived, his mind hadn't. Not quite. Before the accident, Gage had been a model citizen, sober, responsible, and remarkably industrious. However, after the accident, Gage became impulsive, unpredictable, and often offended those around him with abundant profanity. Furthermore, he lost all money sense, and legend has it that this led him to become a drunk, beggar, sociopath, and con man who sold the rights to his posthumous skull to medical schools multiple times, pocketing the change each time. Simply put, Gage was no longer Gage. In 1849, Gage was examined by Dr. Henry Bigelow of Harvard, who concluded that because Gage could still walk, talk, see, and hear, his brain must be fine. This was consistent with the medical consensus of the time, which held that the frontal lobes of the brain, where the iron had shot through Gage's head, didn't do much. As such, Gage moved on with his life, even working for a stint in P.T. Barnum's museum in New York, where skeptical viewers could pay an extra dime to part Gage's hair and see his brain pulsating beneath his scalp. More current research has shown that Gage experienced considerable recovery, as he was able to handle driving a stagecoach through the winding roads of South America. 12 years after the accident, Gage died, penniless, as epilepsy inevitably set in. 8 years after Gage's death, Dr. John Harlow gained the right to exhume Gage's skull from the grave. After studying it, Harlow connected Gage's cognitive and behavioral changes to the presumed area damaged by the accident, the first ever to propose such a link. This opened the possibility that there were compartments in the brain dedicated to the planning and execution of personality and socially suitable behavior, or rationality. While this should have had a huge and immediate scientific impact, Harlow never acquired autopsy results, and his reports were easily dismissed by the scientific community. Within the last century, scientists have discovered that parts of the frontal lobes contribute to nearly every activity inside the brain. However, the exact function of the frontal lobe regarding behavior, morality, and impulse control remained largely unclear as they are not easily tested in the laboratory. In 1994, a team of researchers from the University of Iowa set out to determine the exact trajectory of the tamping iron through Gage's skull in the hopes of connecting his behavioral changes to a specific area of the brain. Using modern imaging technologies, they were able to determine that the rod did not touch the areas of the brain that control speech and motor functions. Most importantly, they were able to conclude that it was the damage to the frontal lobe that had prompted Gage's personality change, proving Dr. John Harlow correct more than 100 years after he created his hypothesis. However, because so little had been written about Gage by Harlow, and much of what is known about Gage's behavioral changes has been skewed by a century of popular and scientific myth, the team was forced to admit that the exact changes caused by the damage to the frontal lobe are nothing more than an educated guess. It's tempting at first to write off the story of Phineas Gage as a tall tale, something only to be spoken of around campfires on a late summer night. But, despite there only being a couple hundred words attesting to how his behavior had changed, he came to dominate the thinking about the function of the frontal lobes. Even today, his story implies that whenever people suffer grave damage to the frontal lobes, as a soldier might, or victims of strokes or Alzheimer's or cancer might, something as essentially human as behavior or morality can vanish. Moreover, scientists are recognizing that the brain can recover lost functions in certain circumstances, just as in how Gage was able to take on the highly skilled job of maneuvering stagecoaches through the winding terrain of South America. If even Phineas Gage, the man who broke bad as the result of a freak accident, could bounce back, that in itself is a powerful message of hope.